Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Best of Johnson County podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden. And on today's episode, we're having a special edition of the Best of Johnson County podcast called Ask Jonathan Breeden Anything. Normally, we do podcasts where I, Jonathan Breeden, ask local community leaders, small business owners, and interesting people that I meet in and around Johnson County questions about why they love Johnson County and the services and businesses they provide to the citizens. On the special edition podcast of the Best Johnson County podcast, our social media coordinator, Raina Birch, asked me, Jonathan Breeden, questions surrounding family law, which is what we primarily do here at the Breeden Law Office, our primary office here at 4042 behind the food line. We also have an office on 3rd Street in Smithfield. So anyway, this is a special edition of the podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about the holidays and custody during the holidays. I know the holidays have just passed, but these are always very stressful times in family law situations. And we spend a lot of times talking about what's best for kids during the holidays or what we think might be best. And so you might find this interesting if you've ever been in that situation. But before we get to that, we'd like to invite you to like, follow, subscribe to the Best of Johnson County podcast, wherever you're seeing it, whether it be on Apple, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, or any of the other social media channels of Best Johnson County podcast. Best Johnson County podcast comes out every single Monday and has now for over 15 months. So be checking back every Monday for new and exciting episodes of interesting people in Johnson County, and go back and listen to some of the previous episodes with people like County Commissioner Butch Lauder, County Commissioner Patrick Harris, State House Member Donna White, soon to be, by the time this episode airs, Congressman Brad Knott when he was running for office. These are all fascinating podcasts. I think you'll learn a lot about these people and what is going on in Johnson County by listening. And if you also do us the favor of giving us a 5-star review down at the bottom wherever you're seeing this podcast, that would be great, as well as it will help increase our visibility. So you ready, Raina?
Welcome to another episode of Best of Johnston County, brought to you by Breeden Law Office. Our host, Jonathan Breeden, an experienced family lawyer with a deep connection to the community, is ready to take you on a journey through the area that he has called home for over 20 years. Whether it's a deep dive into the love locals have for the county or unraveling the complexities of family law, Best of Johnston County presents an authentic slice of this unique community.
I'm ready if you're ready.
All right, I'm ready. I will see what we are. Hopefully I will know the answers to these questions.
I think you will.
I say that every time.
You do that. All right, so the first question is, how do you fairly divide custody time during the holidays?
You know, the answer is always it depends, right? It always depends. But
with the law, it always
right. It depends. But as a general rule, parents will try to share the time somewhat equally during the holidays. And and now really the holidays that we focus on are Thanksgiving, Christmas, July 4th, spring break. Yeah, really, those are the ones.
Easter usually falls.
Right, Easter is connected to spring break almost always in Johnston and Wake and Harnett counties in North Carolina. So, it is, usually, even if it's not a custody situation where it is 50-50, the holidays are often 50-50 in some way or fashion. And there's a lot of different ways to split up the holidays. But if you're going to court and you're asking a judge to make a decision, they're going to do their best to try to split the holidays equally.
Okay. So when you say equally, do you mean the actual holiday itself? So like Memorial Day, they spend half of it with one and half with the other? Or we're like one gets Memorial Day weekend and one gets Labor Day weekend?
It's more like that, right? Usually it's the weekend. So with Labor Day, Memorial Day, sometimes you see Martin Luther King Day, but mainly you see Memorial Day and Labor Day, where the Monday is always going to be connected to the weekend. Mm-hmm. They will say that the father gets Memorial Day weekend in even-numbered years, and the mother gets it in odd-numbered years. And if the father gets Memorial Day, if he gets it in even-numbered years, then the mom is going to almost get Labor Day in even-numbered years. So it ends up being similar. And so usually you'll get the entire weekend. Yeah. And so it'll be from Friday at 6 to Monday at 6. Mm-hmm. And holiday visitation supersedes any regular custodial visitation. Yes. So even if that would have been the mother's weekend, if that happens to be the father's holiday, that's going to supersede, and the father is going to get that weekend, which means sometimes even in a every other weekend situation, one parent would get 3 straight weekends. Yes. As far as Christmas is concerned, there's a lot of different ways to divide Christmas. For kids that go to public school, they're always going to get 2 whole weeks out of school, depending on when Christmas is, but they're going to get 2 weeks every time. Sometimes, like we just had Christmas in 2024, where Christmas falls in the middle of the week, you end up getting more than 2 weeks, this time, because they're not going to go, this year they got out, that the Friday before, and then they didn't go all the way back till January the 6th. You got 2 whole weeks, plus there's 3 weekends there.
Yeah.
So most judges are going to divide Christmas in a couple different ways. Number one, the most common practice is they'll say from the day school out till Christmas Day at 2 p.m. or Christmas Day or December 26th at noon. It will be with one parent, and then the other parent gets the child from either December 25th at 2 p.m. or December 26th at noon until the day before school resumes at 6 p.m. So if you would have had that schedule for the 2024 Christmas that just passed, if you had the first half, you would have gotten a much shorter period of time because school didn't get out till Friday.
Yeah.
Christmas that year was on a Wednesday. You would have only had those 5 or 6 days. And then the parent with the back half would have gotten 10 or 11 days. You would have gotten all the way from Wednesday the 25th to Monday the 6th. Now that averages out when it's all said and done, when you're alternating it, as far as that's concerned, particularly when you have small children, you're doing Santa Claus, Christmas Eve and Christmas morning is important.
Yes.
And so what the court will do is, if you and I were married, you would get the first half of Christmas in the even years. You would get the second half of Christmas in the odd years. I would get the second half of Christmas in the even years and the first half in the odd years. Now, that is the most common way to divide Christmas. If you have people in this area, we have a lot of people from other parts of the country, and their families are not here because it's a very transient area here. You will see parents agree. And every once in a while, you'll see judges do it where they'll give one parent the entire break, the entire 2 weeks for an even year, or the entire 2 weeks in an odd year. And that allows people to travel long distances, either go out of state, see family, go to Hawaii, something like that, because the kids are out of school, so you can have a longer break that way. So those are
you're not interrupting the holidays for the children and family members and whatnot to have to travel back.
Correct. The third way we see Christmas is in a 50-50 scenario where you're doing week on, week off, or you're doing this sort of 2-2-3, Monday, Tuesday, mom, Wednesday, Thursday, dad, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, mom, Monday, Tuesday, dad. When it's truly a 50-50 where there are fairly exchanges, sometimes Christmas is just Christmas Eve at 6 p.m. till Christmas Day at noon, Christmas Day at noon to December 6th, 26th at 6 p.m. And then it just goes back to whatever the regular schedule would have been.
Yeah.
Particularly in true 50-50s for people who have family in the area, they're not having to go very far. You could see that as well. Thanksgiving, every once in a while you'll see them divided up on Friday. Day school out in North Carolina, they don't go to school on Wednesday. So it's Tuesday to Friday at 3 p.m. And then the other parent would get Friday at 3 p.m. until Sunday at 6 p.m. or maybe until the children return to school on Monday. Or you'll see a parent get the entire Thanksgiving break from Tuesday at 6 p.m. because they always get out of school on Tuesday to Sunday at 6 p.m. as well. That tends to alternate even odd as well. Spring break, same thing. Every once in a while you'll see a judge divide it in half, but the vast majority of the time it's from the day school gets out for the break till school returns. It always includes an entire week and 2 weekends. So that's a 9 or 10 day period for that parent. Once again, it allows the parent, if they want to take them on an extended trip out of town, Disney World, you can still go skiing in certain parts of the country and later in March, whenever it is. Of course, that's going to move around as Easter moves around. Easter is connected to the first full moon after is it the vernal equinox? I'm bad at the equinoxes. It is the first full moon after whatever the equinox is in February or March or whatever that is. I'm not good at meteorology. But so anyway, so that does move around as well. Yeah. We talked about Memorial Day and Labor Day. You see that. Sometimes you see King Day, but not as often as you see Memorial and Labor Day, just in custody orders. Yeah. That's kind of what judges do. Like this is kind of what they do. In Wake County, they have year-round schools. Yeah. So, those kids, everybody gets that 2 weeks of Christmas. I don't care if year-round or not. Yeah. But some kids also then get the month of January.
That would be mine.
which is if you're on track 4,
Yep.
you wouldn't then go back to after Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
So, that gets to be, sometimes you have, this is what we're going to do for Christmas, and this is what we're going to do for track out. And and that can be all kinds of stuff. And, and often the judges will, particularly in Wake County, split that track out. That track out usually is about 24 days. It's 3 entire weeks. You got a couple weekends on the end, and they'll say, sort of divide it in half, usually on a Wednesday in the middle of it. One parent gets the first 10 or 12 days of it. Other parent gets the other 10 or 12 days of it. And so that's kind of how track outs work in Wake County.
And I will say, in my experience, because 50-50 week on, week off, if you have them for 2 out of the 3 weeks on one track out, you'll probably have them for 1 out of the 3 weeks on the next track out. So it all kind of washes out. It works itself out in the end anyway.
Right. So, right. But once again, the key thing is all families have traditions.
Yes.
Some may be more positive than others,
Yes.
but all families have traditions, and children should be part of each family's traditions, whatever that is.
Yes.
And because the parents are divorced or they're separated, and they won't be able to do it maybe every year. Yes. Like some families, my wife's family does a really big thing on Christmas Eve. And unfortunately, we've not been able to go to that with small children. They live several states away. We will go on Christmas Day or the day after Christmas. So, maybe you not always get to do Christmas Eve, but then we get to do it every other year.
Yeah.
Because under all of these scenarios, you would get every other Christmas Eve, every other Christmas morning,
yes,
at a bare minimum. And so if your family's thing is Christmas Eve, then your children would be able to participate in that every other year. Or Christmas Day lunch. Every family has a different thing. Some families eat Thanksgiving on Thanksgiving Day. Some families eat Thanksgiving on Fridays. Like everybody, it's up to the individual families.
Yeah. And I will say, as a parent who has that whole, like we do the whole break, like you were talking about, where, if I have my kids for Christmas, I have them for the entire Christmas break. But the way that, we had worked it out was, so we have Christmas break, Thanksgiving break, 4th of July, Labor Day, Memorial Day, New Year's, Easter, all that. We took all of those holiday days, we added them up and split them in half and said, okay, how can we fit this so that we each have the same amount of holiday time with the kids each year, but without having to split up the actual holidays themselves. So that actually worked out really, really well for us.
Well, cool. That's good. Yeah. So some people do that too, which is good. I mean, when you can work it out, it's always better than going to ask a judge. You don't know what a judge is going to do.
Yeah.
And the judge doesn't really care what your family traditions are.
No.
But if you can work it out, maybe they can get there.
Yeah, precisely. Okay, next one. So do grandparents or other families have visitation rights during the holidays?
They do not, unless they actually intervene into the custody case and a court grants them specific visitation rights during the holidays. So as a general rule, grandparents in North Carolina are not entitled to visitation rights. But grandparents in North Carolina can file for full custody of a child if they can prove that both parents are unfit and acting contrary to their protected rights as a parent. Or grandparents can actually file for visitation by intervening in an ongoing controversy between the two parents, which means the case is ongoing litigation. They are battling it out. The grandparent can't start a case for visitation. The grandparent can't file a motion after the case has been settled and a permanent custody order has been entered. But while they're fighting it out, temporary custody up to permanent custody, a grandparent can file a motion to intervene into the case. And if a judge grants their intervention in, the court could then award them some visitation around the holidays as an intervener in the case.
Gotcha. But
they've got to be in the case and, have an attorney or not have an attorney, but go to the hearings and show why they should be granted some visitation at all. And usually there'll be something around the holidays for that grandparent if the judge believes it is in the best interest of the child and the judge believes that neither parent may share the child with the grandparent.
Yes. So just because, maybe kids have been spending this particular holiday with their grandparents every year and then the parents get divorced doesn't mean that the grandparents are entitled to still spend that holiday.
Correct.
Got it.
But go back to the first question, you're going to get every other of everything.
Yes.
So that grandparent's child can bring the children to whatever that event is at a minimum every other year.
Yeah. So, okay. Is child support affected during the holidays if, maybe one parent has the kids more than they normally would? Does that
No,
affect anything?
it does not. Child support is owed all 12 months of the year, regardless of where the children are staying. We did just recently have a judge go away from that, but that's not what the law is. The law is that you look at child support is calculated out of the total number of overnights that each parent has in a year of 365 days. And it is determined based on that. And that amount of money is due on the first of every single month, even in a month when you might have the child the entire month of July, particularly on a multi-state visitation schedule where a child is going to be spending 6 weeks at a time with a parent. And so, or at Christmas where you may get the whole 2 weeks.
Yep.
Because it is based on the total number of nights in a year, the child support is owed every single month, regardless of how much visitation that a parent has individually in it.
Got it. Okay. So what happens if a parent violates the custody agreement during the holidays?
If a parent violates a custody order, now that we've talked
Agreement
many times
versus
before,
order,
right,
yes.
right. An agreement, a verbal agreement is not enforceable. Okay.
Write it down.
Right. And get it signed by a judge.
Yes.
So if you have a court order signed by a judge, if you have a separation agreement and they violate the separation agreement, you have to sue them for breach of contract. And while you're at it, I would sue them for custody and custody court so I can get a custody order signed by a judge.
Yes.
If you have a court order signed by a judge and a parent violates it during the holidays, you can file a motion to show cause against that parent for violating a valid court order and ask the court to order them to appear and show cause why they should not be held in contempt of court and placed in jail for violating the court's order willfully. And so, but no, that process is 2 to 6 months. So if they violate it on December 23rd, you're not going to get your kid back for December 25th. You're just not. That parent will probably at some point end up doing some time in jail in April or May of the next year by the time you get it heard, but it doesn't get your kid back December 25th. It's not emergency custody if the child's not in immediate danger. The courts are closed right around the holidays. But I will tell you that if a court finds that somebody's violated the order, not only will they put them in jail, they will give that parent who lost their visitation of the holidays make-up time in the future to make up for it.
Oh, that's good to know.
Most of the time. Every judge is different.
Yes.
Have family law questions? Need guidance to navigate legal challenges? The compassionate team at Breeden Law Office is here to help. Visit us at www.breedenfirm.com for practical advice, resources, or to book a consultation. Remember, when life gets messy, you don't have to face it alone.
Okay, last question. Is it okay to travel out of state during the holidays? I know we kind of already answered this, but does it have to be in the custody order that you're allowed to take your kids out of state, or is it kind of a given? How does that work?
I believe that traveling out of state with your child is a given and is only restricted if the order has restrictions on it.
Okay.
The fear always is that you're going to move a child out of state on what you hope to be a permanent basis without the other client's permission. That's where the whole out of state thing, and we have lots of emergency custody cases every year where somebody has taken a child, and my office currently has one where the child has gone to Hawaii. Now twice. We went to Hawaii, got the child back. Now that parent has gone again to Hawaii with the child, and we have to get the child back a second time. And that's just unfortunate. So that's always the fear, is that somebody's going to move the child out of state to take the child away from the jurisdiction of the state and away from the other parent. Yeah. And so that's always the fear. But your normal visitation, like you're going to see grandma and grandma is in Pennsylvania, or you're going to Myrtle Beach to see the Christmas shows and the lights, or whatever else people go to Myrtle Beach, that's in South Carolina. Not a big deal unless your order specifically addresses leaving the state. And it will address leaving the state if there's been a problem, or there's been a threat, or you ran a text, or you repeated problem. Then you'll see courts starting to put restrictions on leaving the state. Some judges, as a matter of fact, will just put in all of their orders that if you're going to leave the state with the child, you give the other parent at least 2 weeks notice, and you tell them where the child's going to be staying, a phone number where the child can be reached, and when the child will be brought back into the state. They'll make you share plane tickets with the other parent,
Mm-hmm.
not for the other parent to revoke it, just so the parent knows where the child's going to be.
Yeah.
You see that, but in 98% of the cases, routinely just taking your child to grandma's or Myrtle Beach or whatever is not a big deal. And most orders don't even really address it at all unless there's been a problem in the past. And then you got to do whatever the order says. Maybe the order says you can't. Maybe the order says you have to have permission. Maybe the order says you have to give 30 days notice. I don't know, but you got to do what the order says.
Yeah.
But as a general rule, there is no prohibition on taking the child out of the state in most custody orders. Sometimes there's one if you're taking the kid out of the country that you got to give them 30 days notice. If it's a really high contest case, we've got some of those. Who holds the passport, how you get the passport. Those are the rare exceptions. And so most of the time you can travel with your child where you want to go.
Unless otherwise stated.
Right, basically unless otherwise stated. And you're not intending to move the child out of the state on a permanent basis.
And saying I'm only taking them for the holidays, and then
right.
You're actually really
right. And I've been doing this almost 25 years. I've got a case in my head for every fact pattern we just talked about.
Yeah.
But those are rare,
yes.
right? Like you do it long enough, you're going to see the rarities. And so
when most parents can work it out between themselves, they're
correct.
not coming here for every little thing, but
correct.
when it's a big deal or a nuance or something like that, that's why you're seeing we see a lot of those cases.
Right. We see, right. And that's, right. We often see the
outliers.
The worst of them, right? Why we need to pay us a bunch of money to represent
yes.
you, if it was going to be a normal thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But even those are even more outliers, even from some of the ones where they're arguing over is going to be every other weekend, it's going to be 50-50, that kind of stuff. Most people are fine with their children traveling someplace. I mean, the odds that a parent's going to move some child permanently, like it's just rare, right? People have jobs, they have houses, they have careers, they have friends, they have new spouses, all of that stuff.
Yep.
I mean, most people are pretty set where they are. And if you want to move, if you're listening to this thinking, well, I would like to move to somewhere else, and you have a court order, you need to get permission.
Yes.
And if you don't have a court order, you need to go get a court order to give you permission to move. Don't just move your kid across state lines without getting the permission of the court or the express written permission of the other parent, because then that leads to an emergency custody case. And we've talked about that in the past. Yeah. And that's not a good situation for anybody involved. And nobody wants to be subject to an emergency custody case.
No. Well, that was all I had, unless there's anything that you can think of off the top of your head that you would just suggest parents do when it comes to holidays and custody.
Communicate. Communicate.
Yes.
Be understanding. Share.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize that the other parent would like to spend the holidays with their child as well. Recognize that other family that you may have been a part of for some period of time has traditions. Maybe you dislike those family members, but those are the traditions of the family. That is that child's family, whether you like those people or not.
Yep.
Communicate, talk about what those are, share, those kinds of things are always better. I just wrote a blog, about Halloween, in particular, trick-or-treating, right? For little kids, that's a big deal.
Yes.
Share the kids on October 31st. It's rare the courts are going to put Halloween in a court order, but if you have the kid, there's all these now trick-or-treats and all that other stuff. Dress the kid up, take it to one of those. We have sort of a Halloween season now, right?
Yes.
And so that's, I think that's, that's important. And recognize that, yes, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day are important. There's no doubt about it, right? They're important to me. They're important to you, but there are other days, right? The Christmas season goes the entire month of December. And, you could share special times and open presents and go do things, if you don't have Christmas Eve and Christmas morning or Christmas Day that year, it's not the end of the world. You could still do Christmas with your child just as you normally would. It just would be on a different day, and the kid's not going to care.
No.
The kid's going to be happy to be getting the presents and spending the time with the family and making those traditions. All that stuff matters. And recognize that this child is half the other side's, and it's half the other side's family, and that family and those traditions are just as important to that child, even though they may not be to you because you hate that family, are just as important to that child as the traditions that you have in your family. And I think making sure that children get to participate in all aspects and all traditions, I think is better.
Yes. And like you said, communicate not only obviously with your co-parent to coordinate things, but also, recognize that your co-parent misses their kids, but your kids also miss your co-parent. and let them communicate. So, if maybe set aside a certain time during Christmas Eve or Christmas Day for them to be able to call and have a conversation and say Merry Christmas when they're not with that parent for that holiday.
Right.
And just
FaceTime. Here, look at all these presents I got.
Yes.
Right? Oh, yeah. I mean, we always FaceTime with the grandparents, right?
All the technology. So I think it's really important to understand and kind of make room for that, for them to be able to reach out to their co-parent, talk to them, the other family members during the holidays when they're not with them that year.
Right.
It's just, I think it does everybody a world of good.
I don't disagree. Like I said, and you're not winning any awards by keeping the child away from the other parent and not sharing the holidays with that parent. You're just not. And if you're in a contested case and you're doing that before you get a ruling, the judge is going to look down on you for that and may make a different overall custody decision based on how you were acting towards that other parent before the court got involved. So keep that in mind as well. So anyway, that'll do it for this edition of the Best of Johnson County podcast, special edition, Ask Jonathan Breeden Anything, where we talked about the holidays and different ways to share the holidays and how important it is to communicate. As we asked you earlier, if you would be so kind to like, follow, and subscribe to this podcast, wherever you're seeing it on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, or Instagram, or any of the other Best of Johnson County social media pages, so you'll be aware of future episodes of the Best of Johnson County podcast. You'll leave us a 5-star review down at the bottom. We would be greatly appreciative of that. Until next time, I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden.
That's the end of today's episode of Best of Johnston County, a show brought to you by the trusted team at Breeden Law Office. We thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to sharing more interesting facets of this community next week. Every story, every viewpoint adds another thread to the rich tapestry of Johnston County. If the legal aspects highlighted raise some questions, help is just around the corner at www.breedenfirm.com.